start off with, it says preparing to live stream the meeting. So setting your meeting up for YouTube Live. This is a brand new experience, but like good improvisers, we want to take risks and try new things. Okay.
Absolutely.
So with, it says preparing to live stream.
Oh no. Margot, you're gonna have to mute that.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay. So Clay, why don't you
Caller, turn your radio down.
We're trapped in the matrix.
And I have to say that in addition to Clay, we have the wonderful Landon Kirksky, our engineer, who makes the podcast sound really great. And you might be hearing Landon from time to time because he may have some questions as well. So starting off, Clay, let's introduce you by having you. Now, I know you grew up on a farm. So when people say, did you grow up in a barn? You might say yes to that question, right?
I would
So
kind
tell
of
us
say
a little
yes.
about who you are and where you come from, okay?
Sure. I'm from a beef cattle ranch in Ohio. And yeah, until I was 8 years old, we lived the farm life. And then I eventually went to college, majored in theater, and then went on to get a master's degree in performance studies, master's of science in education, specifically adolescent education. And then I also got my PhD in drama and theater studies. And mixed in with all that, I was also a professional actor for over 10 years. I was on, briefly on shows like Law and Order SVU, independent films, things like that. And I was a classroom teacher for 5 years. I write for Psychology Today. And I really focus on improv science and the everyday. And that writing for Psychology Today came out of my work in grad school. I wrote an academic book about how theatrical improvisation affects the mind. So that's me.
That's terrific. And you are a father and a husband and enjoying life during the pandemic, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. My daughter is 3 now. So all that improv stuff is just really coming in handy now. And it's so much fun to use it to play with her and to really be in the moment with her. And yeah, the pandemic has been brutal because we can't socialize as much as we're used to. But it has been nice to slow down a bit and spend more time with family. My husband is working from home now, so I get to spend a lot more time with him. He used to commute a couple hours into the city 3 times a week, which was a lot.
Wow,
and so it's, pros and cons. I try to look on the bright side.
That's great. Well, I did want to ask you a question about your TV habits recently, because I know that we were both watching The Undoing.
Yes.
So,
yes. Can we talk about it?
Any spoiler alerts? What'd you think about the ending? Wasn't it great?
I especially liked it because it was filmed right where I live. It was filmed up in Ulster County, which was really cool.
Yeah, what bridge was that? That bridge looked familiar.
I'm so bad with road names and bridge names and things, but I know that it's in Kingston.
Right.
I think it's one of the bridges over the Rondout Creek, I think. I'm so bad at this, but it's one of those bridges in Kingston.
So, but what did you actually think of the ending?
We'll
talk about improv in a bit, but let's talk about.
I don't want to do spoilers. So I definitely, it got the heart pumping. It was definitely an exciting ending, very primal feeling, like some of the performances.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked how manipulative, in a good way, the show was. How they tried to get you to think one thing, and so I liked that throughout.
And if you were cast in that show, who would you want to be? And forget about real gender.
Okay. All right. Let me see. I love questions like this. I always play this game when we watch anything. I play this game with my friends. Like, who would you be? Let me think here. What was the most character actory role? Maybe the Donald Sutherland part.
Exactly. That's my pick too. Yes.
That's a great.
So brilliant. Yeah.
He's so great. I'm so glad he's in everything now. Like, I'm so glad he's having this moment where he's just in every movie and every TV show. He's amazing.
I love him so much. So let's talk a little bit about Play Your Way Sane. One of the things I love about the book is that it's like we're just having a conversation. It's like you're just talking with me as just a regular conversation. Is that how you wanted to write the book, Clay?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you got that from it, and I've heard some people say that, and that was absolutely my intention, because I do have a background in academic writing. I have, academic published papers and chapters and things like that. And I always try to be accessible when I write about scientific things or psychological things or historical things. But it still doesn't feel like me, right? It still is like, oh, I have to sound a little bit serious.
Right.
And so this really, I set out to write this right after I wrote that academic book and was doing that serious research for a couple of years. And I almost didn't have a choice. Like, it really was partially for me. The book was to figure out, how can I apply improv thinking to my everyday life so that I can be less anxious and I can be more present. So part of the reason was that I was writing it sort of, just for me, but not entirely, right? I always had the idea that if this would help me, it would help other people. And so it just felt like, if I'm writing about improv, I have to speak like that. Like, I have to be my true self and show up and be vulnerable and, just be as authentic as I can. Otherwise, it's not, to me, a book about improv.
Well, I got to tell you, I just even the titles are really something, like, setting the stage. Let's talk about you. Calm the hell down. Finding the game. Now, Killing Debbie Downer, I got to say, was one of my favorite chapters, because I can flip into Debbie Downer as soon anytime. I mean, I really can. And so some of the games, and what I loved is that you took improv games and then translated them into everyday activities. And that is part of the brilliance of this book, which is it on sale now, by the way?
It is, yeah. Pre-orders until January 19th, and then it's you can get it immediately on January 19th. But yeah.
That's awesome. So in Killing Debbie Downer, there was a game 36 on the other hand, and it's kind of like New Choice. Can you explain that?
Yeah. The idea is, because I'm the same. I can definitely flip into negative thinking. I'm also really susceptible to negative thinking, from someone else. Like, if someone starts complaining about someone, I kind of yes and that without thinking about it, instead of taking a pause to try to be more positive. And so this was my way to just force myself to flip out of negative thinking. So the New Choice idea is that if you say something negative, what would be an example of, oh, it's been raining for 3 days, the weather is just awful. And then you can do a new choice, right? You can catch yourself mid-conversation. No one has to know you even read my book. And you can just catch yourself and you say, it's been raining for 3 days, miserable weather. On the other hand, this is going to be great for my garden. And we actually needed the rain. It's been a drought for a while. And that just forces you. It's like an emergency break to stop the negativity and just insert something positive into the conversation. And I think it's important. I try to make it really clear that I'm not telling people to not to ignore negative things. Like, that's not at all what I'm doing. Some things I say in the book are legit bad. Some things are bad. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's not great, right? So I'm not asking people to be toxically positive, right?
Right, like Pollyanna plus 1,000.
Right. It's just, if you notice that you are negative, this is a way for you to make a new choice and to try being positive and to experiment and see, how does that affect the rest of your day? How does that affect that particular conversation? And for me, it's always eye-opening. As soon as I switch and start being positive, other people do too. And then I prime myself to think of more positive things. It's just shifting and saying like, yes, there are bad things. There's also good things.
Exactly. You reminded me of something. I've been working in addictions for almost 40 years now. And we talk about the mobile effect. So like, for example, in an alcoholic family, everybody's in these different positions. But if one part changes, like if you move one piece of the mobile, everything in the mobile changes. So that is, if one person comes in and stops being so much of a Debbie Downer and changes their attitude, it affects everybody.
Yeah.
So it can be a positive attitude, can be contagious. And that's why I don't like to argue in improv. I don't like games that are full of conflict and argue. I like games where we love each other. And that reminds me, not everybody might know who Debbie Downer is, because, you know, we may have a younger audience. And can you tell them who Debbie Downer was?
I mean, as far back as I know it's the old Saturday Night Live sketch, right? Is that,
Yep.
Maybe it goes back further. But there was an old Saturday Night Live sketch, and Rachel Dratch was Debbie Downer, and you can find it, you can Google it, find it on YouTube. It's hilarious. And she was just a character where the conversation's sort of going on and people are talking about normal things. And then every time she would insert something just toxically negative about like feline AIDS, and I mean just like really ridiculous, super negative things. And then it does the wah wah with like a close up of her. And so that's where it comes from. Although my mom was a little upset because she said, "Why does it have to be Debbie?" Because her name is Debbie.
Your name is Debbie.
Yeah.
Well, you dedicated your book to your mom. Tell us about that a little bit.
I did. I dedicated my first book, the academic one, to my dad. He had just passed. And, you know, he obviously played a large role in my life. But this book is just very different than anything I've done. It's very playful and irreverent and accessible. And that's my mom. That is my mom. She is eternally young and super playful without seeming to have to try. Like I kind of have to try at it. Like I have to be like, that's why I came up with these games. You know, I have to say, all right, I'm going to play this game, and then I can snap into the silliness. But she just seems to be effortless with it. It's just in her nature, I think. And her side of the family is kind of like that as well. And a lot of the games I just stole from her. They're games that I played with her as a kid, you know, games that helped me clean my room faster, games that you know, just the ways to pass the time, being imaginative instead of, you know, turning on the TV.
Right. And today the all the devices kids
Yeah.
have. And you would play games in the car, different things in the car. Can you think of a car game? I can't think of one right now.
Well, my favorite car game that I play still, actually, I don't even think, let me think, is it in the book? Well, the one that is in the book is called Sidewalk Bombs. And that's, you just choose, like, if you're driving in the car, you can decide, like, I have to get to mile marker 45, whatever it is, by this time. And if I don't, like, everything's going to explode. So it's just a weird way to, like, instead of overthinking or thinking about all the work you have to do or how you shouldn't have said that at lunch, like, it's just a way to start having more fun while you are wherever you are, which is driving your car or walking down the street. So I like that one. I also do the game, it's not in the book, where I try to, if it starts to rain, I try not to use my windshield wipers, like, for a certain amount of time. It seems really silly, but it makes it this, like, adventure of, like, ooh, can I go until the next minute on the clock without using my windshield wipers? And it's,
yeah, Clay, games are a lot more fun when they're dangerous.
I mean, but then also the fun part, it's like a video game. Like, even if you, like, die in the game, like, you know, you're not really dead. But the windshield wiper game, yeah, kind of dangerous. That's probably why it's not in the book.
Well, another game that you talked about is if your mom went in the store and left your you kids, your brothers and sisters
Yeah.
in the car. And to some people that might sound a little dangerous in today's world, but
We were
you were
older.
safe and you weren't locked in a car where you were
No.
going to get heat stroke or anything. And then you'd play the game of the next one out of the grocery store is mom, and a big
Mhm.
burly trucker would come out and that would crack you all up.
I still do this game, right? If I'm waiting for my husband or something, like he went to the bathroom at a restaurant, I'll be like, all right, the next person who goes around that corner I'm married to that person. And then if it's him, you're like, oh, okay. Or if it's someone else, it's funny. I don't know. It's strange ways to just pass the time.
That's great. Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to your career in improv and acting. I am rewatching the original Law and Orders right now. The pandemic has made strange TV habits,
Yes.
but the very first ones, the first year actually. And do you remember what years you were on it or?
Oh, all right. So Law and Order, I was just on season 20. So I
Oh.
want to say that was 2000, 2008. I want to say 2008, somewhere around there, a long time ago. And I played, I was a witness. I was in a few scenes, and it was all the witnesses lived in like what are those homes for people with mental not mental illness, but like learning disabilities. Like you like can't take care of
A
yourself.
group home, like a group
Yeah,
home, you
yeah.
mean?
So I lived in like a group home, and I was a witness. But it's
Wow.
yeah.
So one of my favorite persons on that show, and he's deceased now, was the actor that was in the Fantastics, and I can't think of his name now. Tall. He was a cop. I think
I
he
don't
was still
know.
alive then. Anyway, all right. Well, we can look that up in our Funk and Wagnall later on. It's not that important, okay? So, so you acted, and then how did you get into improv? Was that something you got into early on, or?
Yeah, improv was early on. I got into improv my first year in undergrad, so 1997. And so I made it onto the improv team. The campus just had one improv team. I didn't really know what it was at the time. And those people on my team ended up being my best friends. And it was a really popular group. So anytime we had a show, it was a packed house. And it was just a great first experience with improv because we were a really tight-knit group. We got along really well. We had all different styles of humor. Like I was always like my style of improv, I'm not cerebral. Like I don't do puns. I'm not cerebral. It's like super physical and wacky, and at times chaotic. It's just super spontaneous and silly energy. And so it was nice that we had that with people who were, sort of like frat guy, serious, and we had all different styles of humor, which I just thought it was amazing. So I have done improv since then. So I studied at
Yeah, and you
Magnet, IO, Second City when they were still had a training center in New York, all over the place.
It's great training. There's a lot of different schools of improv now, and there's kind of cerebral discussions about, Spolin or Johnstone or Del Close, or, it just kind of goes all over the place. And I think it's great to study everyone so one can develop their own style. And
yeah, absolutely. When I was teaching acting, I always told my students that they were like in the beginning of the year, they were Dora, the acting explorers. We were going to try all different kinds of things, and their job was to just keep track of what seemed to work for them and what didn't work. And that's always how I approached acting. I find it strange. I mean, I guess it's just not relatable for me when people go on one track and they're like, this is right for me, and that's the only style I'm going to do. I always tried to do everything. I studied at Strasberg. I studied method acting, which to me has a lot of similarities to a lot of what happens in improv. So that, and some of the stuff at Strasberg worked for me, some of it didn't. And I just always took what worked and left what didn't.
And what about Meisner? So you're from New York. Did you take some Meisner there?
I didn't. I mean, I've been exposed to it in various acting classes, but I never took an explicit Meisner class from a Meisner teacher.
I haven't, so I'm probably sounding like an ignoramus, if that word still exists. But I think that the main thing I got was the pinch and the ouch in the Meisner technique.
Oh, what is that?
The pinch and ouch is somebody will say something and you will have an emotional reaction to it, but you keep saying the same thing. Like I would say to you, you look happy, and you'd say back, I look happy. And we just keep doing that until there was a slight movement or something. And that's kind of how an improv scene, I've been working with Dave Rosowski, and that's kind of how we work with him. I think that we just kind of go and kind of observe until there's like a bump or something that we can break into. So
that's more like the slow improv, right? That sort of movement where you're taking your time more, which I really wish I could get more into, because that, to me, you know, when improv seems really like hammed up and quick, you know, sometimes it's just not as gratifying, especially as a viewer. Like, I love to watch people really take their time and create something. I mean, I think it takes such courage and skill. So I'm really intrigued with that style of improv for sure.
I am too. So when people are doing, they're quiet, they're totally quiet, nonverbal, but they're doing object work. Hey, Landon, why don't you come in and give us an example of somebody being quiet and doing object work? I don't know. Can everybody see him? Wait a minute. I'm going to there.
I had a coffee stirrer. That was what I was. that was my big object work moment, was this little tiny coffee stirrer.
I like it. I like it.
I had a thought though, Clay, as you're talking about that, that this sort of a concept of like slow versus kind of hammy, or I don't know what. Like, I think that I think there's always a conversation about you know, improv for performance, you know, versus, you know, something that's more about the process, or the, you know, the idea of the act of creation between people, or play, as your book kind of illustrates. Like, I wonder why there's that sort of dichotomy. Like, why can't we have the best of both worlds? Why can't we live kind of in that moment and still have those slow observational things, but it doesn't have to be so, I don't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Methodical, right? Like, of that whole, like, hey, we're going to, like, that pinch and ouch exercise. Like, we don't have to just sit and observe and wait for something to happen. We can actively put our emotions and points of view in it as well. But at the same time, we're going to be reacting honestly and, you know, naturally to what is going on. What do you think about those kind of two things? Can we have like a middle of the Venn diagram at some point?
I'm sure it already exists. I mean, there's so much out there. I think of TJ and Dave. You know, I think there are people who do, I think, what would be considered slow improv, and it's really popular because it's good. You know, just like there are scripted plays that take 3 hours. You know, if they're good, right? Even something like improvised Shakespeare. You know, there are moments in there that are just rapid fire, quick, like, how are they doing that? But they're also doing this gradual character development as well. So I think there already exists everything probably on the spectrum of that. But improv just has such a big history of the, you know, theater sports, comedy sports type companies. Which I was happily on a comedy sports in New York team. I love that matches my sort of style of being like wacky and high energy. But I think we've had so much of that. Whose line is it anyway? Keith Johnstone's whole idea of making it like a wrestling match, like making it really exciting. You know, I'm glad that exists, but I think that's what a lot of people think about when they hear improv, just because it's so prevalent.
I'm a huge fan of short form. I mean, I guess like the whole thing I was just saying, it kind of does in some ways come down to that long form versus short form argument, which is really tired and, exhausting. But
Yes.
like, I go ahead, Margot.
I was going to say, yes, keep going. Keep going. I'm total agreement.
But like, like the, have like, I always thought like, that short form can for sure, like give you some, can reward some bad habits in certain situations. But it can also instill good ones. And I feel like sometimes we don't look at the good ones, and enough necessarily. Like sometimes you do want to get to it.
Absolutely.
Just get to it.
I think studying both is probably the best way to go. If somebody's thinking about improv very seriously, I mean, I don't know what the improv landscape is going to look like in a year at all.
Clay, it looks a lot like this.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But hopefully, I mean, I definitely envision a world where it's sort of decentralized. Like this might be a moment where a lot of people know a lot about improv, and maybe it's not just you have to go to this school or you have to go to this school. Maybe we're in a moment now where it just spreads out a little bit, and we have more experimentation, more different groups doing different types of work, because some of those big schools are gone already. They didn't make it. So
right.
Well, I was going to say how much, I've taken a lot of classes with Aretha Spolin-Sills, who's Viola's granddaughter. She's wonderful. And, when people bring up long form and short form, she goes, I don't know what that means. And we could carry on. But, in terms of, what I learned is short form were like a lot of the games, but in long form, what they call long form, you got games within the games, etc. But I love all those exercises and games that we learn. I think they're really terrific. And I've been taught by a comedy sports participant in years ago. And so I think it's all good. Let's find what's good for us and what works for us.
Yeah.
And but one of the things about your book, I'm gonna show it again.
Show it again.
Yeah. A great
She's
Christmas
so pretty.
gift. A great Christmas gift.
Yes.
Is that it's for everybody. It's not for improvisers. It's not yet another book on improv, because we do have a plethora of books on improv today, and that's all good. Everybody's got opinions and all of that, but this is for everybody. So again, I love the Debbie Downer. I also loved your mom was wrong. You aren't special. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes. I always lead with this idea when I'm teaching acting or improv, especially improv, that you, whoever I'm talking to, whatever performer it is, are not special. And I think that messaging is helpful for me because I used to think I was the most special person in the world. A lot of my shtick was, that it's all about Clay, sort of, diva-like behavior. But I could get away with it because I was a little bit funny, or maybe I thought I could. And so I always really responded to this really blunt idea of you're not special. Just because it really goes against most of what we're taught, right? Everyone's special, you're unique, all of that stuff. And in improv, that's not really true. If you're thinking about how special you are, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's much more important for you to serve the group. And I think carrying this idea into our everyday lives really serves us. It really helps me, like when I'm getting upset, because I've waited too long getting my oil changed, it helps me to take a step back and say, you are not special. Like there's a room full of people. They all have places to go and people to see. You're not special. And just that mantra, I think, and that idea is really helpful because no one is more or less special than anyone else. And I think I learned that from improv. And I think it's an important lesson that would help people get along better with each other.
Two of the games in that chapter that I love is the mirror game and then a takeoff of the machine game. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, which mirror game? Because there's the first mirror game where you're like mirroring your actual reflection, and then the next one is you're trying to really subtly mirror, like let's use the oil change example. So I'm sitting in the waiting room waiting for my car to, be ready, and they said 10 minutes and it's been 30, and I could get upset, or I could say you're not special, and I could try to mirror someone super subtly. You do not want to get caught, because then
Right.
that's not a good look. And so I would try to mirror. Maybe someone next to me is listening to music and they're kind of like nodding their head. I can focus on them without staring at them, obviously, subtle, and
Right.
like move my head. And for me, when I'm doing that in an acting or an improv class, it's a way for me to get out of my head, right? And not think about, what am I going to say next? What should I do? The scene's not going well. If I just focus on them, kind of do what they do, I don't have to think about that stuff anymore. So that's the first way you can serve the group, or sort of become a part of the group, instead of focusing on me.
And then there was mirroring by looking at yourself in a mirror.
Yes,
And
that's the
practicing it
first
that
one.
way. Yeah.
Just to practice this idea of, because in later games, you focus on trying not to be the leader, trying to just be a part of the organism of the group. And so the first way I want the reader to experience that is just doing it with just themselves in front of a mirror.
And that's a hard job for some people, to look at themselves in the mirror.
Absolutely. Yeah. But there's a ton of reflection that goes into, going through the games of the book. Like, I want people to really explore and think about, why do I say no so much? And do I have to say no all the time? Is that a part of what makes me me? Or am I stuck in a rut? Am I stuck in a bad habit? Same with positivity. Like, am I as positive as I think I am? I don't know. Let's reflect and figure it out and try some ways to be more positive and see, how does that fit on me? So the whole book, I hope people will really reflect and see which habits they want to try to tweak, and which ones are okay.
Yeah. The the way you've organized the book is just beautiful. And also, like I said, bringing out the improv games, but metamorphizing them, is that a word, into something applicable to anybody. So you don't have to want to be an improviser, or want to do improv, or be an improviser. This book is great for everybody. And there's just so many great games in here. Like you did a variation of the game Machine.
Oh, yes. The machine game. That one is this. It's an extension of what I talked about with sitting in the, waiting for your car to be done. Or maybe we don't sit in our offices anymore, do we? So let's say we're in the waiting room and there's a few people there still. The idea is that you try to join in with whatever other people are doing as far as movements go, right? So if someone's tapping their foot, maybe you like sort of get into that rhythm a little bit, super subtly. You don't want people to think you're, and then you try to just find, like, what am I supposed to be doing in terms of movement and sound if everyone in this room was a part of a machine? And then in your head, you do that for a little bit. And then in your head, you decide, okay, what were we? And that's my favorite part of the machine game anyway, is like, we were a, sock maker, or we were a bubble machine, or, whatever it is. And again, it's just a way, because the book really is for people who have any sort of issues with overthinking, anxiety, being in their head, not being distracted, not being in the moment. I mean, it's probably most people, because I have those issues as well. And so a lot of the games are to shift your focus from just thinking to just being really present wherever you are, whether that means you're trying to be part of a machine, or trying to mirror someone, because when I'm really in my head and I'm overthinking, I don't notice anything. Like if I'm taking my dog for a walk and I'm thinking about an article I want to write and I don't know how to start it, and I'm thinking, I can do the whole walk and I did not see a thing. I didn't notice anything. And if I just shift and figure out a way to notice things around me, I can't overthink. You can't do the two things at once. And that's the main sort of thesis for the whole book, is if we can find fun ways to shift our focus, we can snap out of these bad habits like overthinking or negativity.
And that's how improv is mindfulness. And mindfulness is improv because we're in the moment. And if we're not being judgy and we're being part of a team, that's where the beauty comes in, instead of thinking about myself or what I might say next or whatever. So I just love that. With the time we have left, I'd like to talk about the last chapter, because the title is so it's so lyrical, and
Yes, thank
it
you.
just flows off your tongue. And that is shit in the middle of the floor. Can you address that a little bit more?
I really like how you say it. It's really beautiful. Yes, the last lesson is called Shit in the Middle of the Floor. And when I was teaching acting at a university, one of the things I would say a lot is, instead of saying make a big choice, I would say shit in the middle of the floor. Because to me, that's me like walking the walk, right? Like I, as a teacher, am making a big choice by talking like that, right? Like that's bold. Like if I'm telling you as an actor, you need to shit in the middle of the floor, you better do something big, right? And so it also comes from my Ohio farm upbringing. Like we have a lot of poetic ways of saying things that I think cut right to it. And so the whole lesson, I think it's important to end the book with, it's great if we're more positive and mindful and we're yes-anding and trying to get rid of shame associated with mistakes. But all of it, only takes us so far. You have to get out there and try some things. And that's the only way change is really going to happen. And so the whole last 10 games, are all different, silly, wacky, fun ways to get you, out of your chair, up into the world as much as possible, and trying to take some risks that are not going to hurt you, but are going to give you a chance to create something or do something.
So yeah, getting out of our comfort zone, taking a risk. And when we do those things, we gain self-confidence, more self-esteem, and it goes on and on. I'm so glad we got introduced by my friends at Improv Group Therapy, Lisa Baines and Angela Nino. I think they introduced us in the beginning. And I think your work is just marvelous. And I know this time next year, you'll be sitting on some talk show talking about the best-selling Playing Your Way Sane.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I hope so.
I hope so, because it's a book for everybody. And I'm so grateful for you and the gifts that you're giving the world. I think improvisers are giving people for the most part. And you're certainly a giver. And someday we may perhaps meet in person. I would
love that. I would love that.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great?
I mean, we go to Florida sometimes, so it's on the table.
Yes. All right. That would be fantastic, especially with your daughter. I'd
Yes.
rather see her more than anybody, actually.
I got it. She's very charming.
That's sorry to say it like that. And again, thanks to the wonderful Landon Kirksky, who's been helping us with our engineering and other things. And I just want to thank you so much, Clay, for your time today, and wish you the best of everything. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Margot, for spreading the word.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right.